Welcome to another PermaSlug episode. My name is Jonathan, and today what I want to do is show you how I used FacetWP and Oxygen along with advanced custom fields to create a site, in this case for a real estate or property management company, that then is automatically filtering out the content based on what the user inputs in these fields. So in this case, of course, you would filter out bedrooms, bathrooms, sales price, and so on. And so just to demonstrate, if I put in, I want a minimum of 4 bedrooms, I click on go, and it's going to filter out everything that doesn't meet that criteria. Now, one disclaimer is I am certainly not a designer, as you can probably tell, and this also is not a real estate site that would integrate with like an IDX or any kind of MLS. This is going to be for companies that want something sort of closed loop and dedicated to themselves that they can manage. So in the back end of WordPress, I have an advanced custom fields group, and it has all of the fields that you would need for a typical real estate or property management site. Bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, gallery, all that kind of stuff. And then in the actual property listing, you can see all of those fields are really self-explanatory. Input the name of the property, input the relevant details. There's a gallery, you have the address, sales price, we have year built, and a features repeater, so you can add as many features as you want. Put the description in the typical WordPress content box here, and then you just add the featured image where you would typically add the featured image. And then what I did was create FacetWP filters that render right here with a simple shortcode, and it's going to filter out the content in this properties archive for us. This particular tutorial assumes that you're familiar with Oxygen to some degree, but if you're not, go ahead and check out my Ultimate Oxygen course at the link in the description below, and then come back and watch this video and it will make a lot more sense. What we'll do now is go ahead and get started and begin from the ground up on designing what you're looking at here. So I want to start off by reiterating that this site is not going to be one that would integrate with any sort of IDX or MLS feed. If that's something that you're after, you need to contact your local MLS and get them to provide you their IDX feed of choice. This is going to be for those of you or those companies that want to build a sort of closed loop system. So you have all the properties listed on your own site, you maintain them in the back end of WordPress, and you can still have all the filters that you would expect, such as bedrooms and bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. So again, this is not going to be any sort of third-party integration. This is all going to be something we set up here in WordPress using the plugins that you see here on the screen. So I'm going to go through these one by one, starting off with Advanced Custom Fields Pro. That's what we're going to use to create all the fields here in the back end, again, for bedrooms and bathrooms and all those custom fields that we need. Make sure that you have the Pro version of ACF because there's a couple things like the gallery that you won't get in the free version that are really important for this particular tutorial. Next up in the list is the Classic Editor. I prefer this, especially when working with ACF fields, and if there are people that are non-technical, because of the fact that it just is a lot more clean, I feel like, in the back end of WordPress to have that Classic Editor. More familiar, especially for people that have used WordPress in the past. That's just a personal preference. You don't have to have Classic Editor. Next up is Cpt Ui, or Custom Post Type UI. So this is a free plugin in the WordPress repository, and just get that because this is where all of our properties are going to live. Next up is FacetWP, so that is basically all of the filtering that we're going to do. So if you said I want a 2-bedroom minimum house, then FacetWP is going to actually do the filtering, so we definitely need that plugin. Gravity Forms is my contact form of choice. What we're going to do with that is create a contact form that goes in our main Oxygen template, and that way it will automatically tell us what form and what page the contact form was submitted on, so that way you don't have to create a unique contact form for every property. You just do it once in the Oxygen template and Gravity Forms does the rest for you. Of course, we're going to use Oxygen to actually design the site and create our templates, so you definitely want to make sure you have Oxygen installed on the site. Now the first thing we're going to do is go to Cpt Ui, hover over that and click on Add Edit Post Type. Again, this is going to be where our properties live, so we're just going to call this property slug properties like that. And then the plural label will be properties once again, and then singular is property, just like that. Click on Add Post Type, and then immediately go over here to the Edit tab. The only post type we have right now is property, so it's going to be automatically selected, and just scroll down until you find the Has Archive option. So Has Archive, you want to set that to true, and that's going to enable you to create an Oxygen template for this properties archive. So that's important. Make sure Has Archive is set to true. Scroll down a little bit further. One personal thing I like to do is for the menu icon, instead of having this little pin, I want it to be something that's a little bit more tied to this particular post type. So click on this dash icon class name. You can find any of these, and if you just click on it, then it's going to give you this option up here to kind of copy the name. All you have to do is just copy that, paste it in the menu icon field, and then just save the post. And you'll notice now the properties changes to that icon instead of the little pen. Just a small little personal preference thing. So you could go ahead and start adding properties, but you don't have all the other fields that you would need for a conventional real estate site. So what we're going to do is jump to Advanced Custom Fields, and we're going to add a new field group. This title up here at the top can be whatever you want, so I'm just going to call this Property Fields, something like that. We're not going to work in Oxygen for the ACF field group, so just minimize this. And then we can go to Post Type is equal to and change that to Property. And then a little bit further down, go to Position and set this to High after Title. If you're using Gutenberg, this doesn't make a difference, but with the classic editor, it puts all of your fields right below the title of the post, basically just right here in this section. And that's all we really need to do at the moment, so we can go ahead and add our first field. So this can be in whatever order you want, and it can always be rearranged later. So for the most part, most of these fields are going to be text, so you can just leave it as the text field for the moment. We're going to start off with bedrooms. That's going to be one of the most important fields that you're going to use, I'm sure. And then we can just click on that edit, and it minimizes it. We'll add another field. We'll just call this one bathrooms. I'm going to go through and add all the kind of conventional fields. And then let's say like square footage, something like that. Next up, let's do a gallery. So we're going to change our field type from text to the gallery option here. And again, you're not going to get this gallery type if you don't have ACF Pro installed. Leave all the rest of this stuff just as is. That's fine. We can always come back and edit it later if we need to. Next up, we'll do the address of the property. And this once again can just be a text field as well. Let's just use sale price, something like this. And then what you want to do here for something like this that is a number, because we're going to format this properly in the back end of Oxygen, set the field type to something like number instead of text, because if somebody has a text field here, in the back end what they could do is add a $ in front of the price, and then it could be inconsistent across the site. So what we can do is set this to number so that it forces people to only type in numbers. And then in our Oxygen template, we could put the $ in front of the number. And then that way it's consistent all the way through the site. Really great, especially if you have people who are non-technical coming behind you, or you want things to be really perfect across your site. Another thing to consider is that you can set all of these fields to required, and that way they're not forgotten. So you could go do that to all of the fields at kind of your own discretion. I'm not going to do that for the moment. I'm going to move on to adding our next field. So let's say you wanted to add some specific features, like let's say a garage. And of course, not every property is going to have a garage. So what I would do in a circumstance like this is I would go down here to the choice option and choose radio button. And then for our choices, you can just say yes or no, of course. And then the reason why I do it this way with the choice option is it gives you a lot of flexibility with the Oxygen conditions, and you can make things appear whether your choice is yes or no. So let's say the garage is not a part of this particular property. Of course, you'd have no selected. And then you could hide an image, or you could hide that bit of text so that it doesn't appear that a property has a garage. Then if somebody chose yes, this property does have a garage, you could add a little icon, or you can add an image that appears dynamically based on the choice that they've chosen. Pretty cool. Another thing you might want on a real estate site is something like year built. Once again, you probably want to make that be a number field, so we'll just change that to number. And then last but not least, we'll just do an additional items repeater. So additional items, and then the field type will go all the way down to repeater. Once again, you're not going to have that unless you have the ACF Pro installed. And then go down here to the subfields. So this subfield, we're just going to add a plain text field. We'll just call this features, something like that. And then that's about it. What you could do is scroll down a little bit further, and the button label, instead of it saying add row, you could change it to add feature, and I'll show you what that looks like later on. So that is pretty much all of our fields. I'm going to scroll all the way back up and click publish, and we'll take another look at this. So there we have our properties fields. You can add or remove any of these that you want if some of them aren't applicable, or if you need more. Just kind of use your best discretion, and generally the field type of text is the safest bet. So bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, all this stuff we're going to incorporate into our FacetWP filters and set it up in Oxygen to render in a template. So now we're ready to move over into creating a property. So let's go to properties and add new. And then I would think most of the time you would want the property title to be maybe like the neighborhood or like the full address, something to that effect. So I'm just going to use like a fake address generator, and I'm going to add the property title in here, and then we'll fill in all the relevant details. So here is what I'm pretty sure is actually a real address, but I just pulled it up online, something random. So let's say this house has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and is 2,150 square feet. We'll go to our gallery here, and I'm just going to choose a photo of a house at random. I'm going to start at the end, and then I'll just choose some random gallery photos here. Let's go to select. And then while we're still at the top of this page, you would want your featured image to just be probably this main property. So let's choose that. Click on Set Featured Image. Scroll down a little bit more, and then the address, I'm just going to take this whole thing, pop that in the address field. The sale price of this house will be $319,000. And actually, one downside to using the number field here is I can't put in a comma. So that's one thing to consider. Maybe that's a trade-off, kind of up to your own discretion, whether you want to use the number field or a text. So moving on, the garage is set to yes. You might actually want to go back to the custom fields group, and what you can do here is under that radio option, the choice field here, let's go to down a little bit and then under allow null. This means that the radio option is not going to be chosen by default. So let's just go back and publish this, and I'll show you that here in just a second. So we'll say the year built was 1998, and then some additional items would be backyard, sunroom, and let's say it has a pool, something like that. So what we can do now is scroll up and go ahead and publish this particular post. And then that change I made to the field group, now what it's going to do is allow me to deselect the garage. So then that way you can always uncheck the choice. So that would be something that you could, again, just use your own discretion on. Maybe set the garage field to required so that it forces people to choose. But with that allow null option, it's going to start off unselected like this, and then it will force somebody to make the choice. So we'll just say this property does indeed have a garage, and then you would add your property's description in here. So I'm going to find a fake property description, and we'll pop that in this field. So there is some text for our property's description, and we'll go back and update this post one more time. Now I'm going to go through and add a couple more properties. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, just make up some data and get some other properties added in here, and then we'll continue on from there. So I realized as I was adding the second property here that I'm actually only going to set the post name to the main kind of beginning street address and not the full address. And then down here in the address field, I'm going to use the whole thing. It's just going to make it a bit more clean so that whenever we're in this backend here, it doesn't have the whole address. I think that'll be a bit long and kind of clumsy looking. So I'm going to drop off the post name to just be the main kind of street address without city, state, and zip. Okay, so I have 6 properties added, as you can see. All of them I filled in the details like the galleries and bedrooms and all that data. So what we're ready to do now is go ahead and design the archive template that Oxygen will use to render the list of all the properties on your site. So go ahead and go to Oxygen and Templates. And on this particular site, I don't have a header set up to render my header and footer. If you want to see a tutorial on how to build the site from the ground up, go ahead and visit the Oxygen Builder course and watch through that, and you'll get an understanding of how to design the main kind of site-wide template. What we're going to do here is just go to Add New Template, and I'm going to call this one Properties Archive. And then if you had a main template or a site-wide template, you would choose to inherit that design, but I'm going to skip over that and go down to the Advanced tab here. Check the box for post type and then scroll down till you get to the properties, and then what you need to do is go ahead and publish this and then click on Edit with Oxygen. Alrighty, so there's a couple of ways to do this. You could use both the repeater and the easy post element. The repeater is going to let you design it in a much more user-friendly way without involving any custom code, whereas the easy post element is a bit more of kind of the advanced way to do things, but what I'm going to use is the repeater. So let's start off by adding in a section. Inside this section, we're going to add in the repeater element. And then we don't need to change the query type because we are in our archive template for the properties. So this repeater element is going to automatically detect that. So we can go ahead and start adding in the content to our repeater right here. So we're going to start off by adding in a heading element. Inside this heading, what I'm going to do is double click it until I get to the insert data option here. Let's use the post title, insert that. And then what you can see is that it will replicate out all of the names of the posts that we just created. So of course we have a lot more styling to do, but we're going to walk through all that, of course, so don't worry. So let's go ahead and add in an image element here. And then we're going to again use the dynamic data to insert the post featured image. This is going to be relatively small because it's just going to be a thumbnail, so we can really just use like the medium size or even thumbnail depending on how small you make it. I'll just do medium and click on insert. Now there is the post featured image for all of the properties that we just created. Next up, underneath this image, let's go ahead and add in another heading element. Let's change this heading to a font size of like H3, and then we'll use the Insert Data option to go to Insert Data. Click on Advanced Custom Field, and then you can choose the Sale Price option here. Click on Insert, and it's going to automatically input the number for the sales price. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where the number field might make sense for you, because what you can do is in front of this shortcode, just add a $sign, and then what it does is just replicate that out for you. So if you want them to be able to add the comma and make the numbers look a bit more clean, totally up to you. You can just basically change the field back to text and you'll be perfectly fine. Next up, let's add in a text element here. And what I'm going to do is insert the data for the, let's say like the bedroom count here. So go to Bedrooms, Insert, and then it's basically just going to spit out the number for you. So once again, what you can do is double click this text element, and in front of it, you can just type the word bedrooms, space that out, and then it's going to automatically input the number of bedrooms in front of that text for us. We can make this look a bit more interesting in just a moment, but I wanted to just demonstrate how you can do this. So let's go ahead and add in another text element. This one I'm just going to call bathrooms, and then we'll go to Insert Data, Advanced Custom Field, Bathrooms, and Insert. All right, so we're starting to get some of the data in for these properties, but it doesn't really look all that great. So we can really easily fix this. I'm going to do a couple of things. Let's go ahead and set this div here to stack child elements horizontally. I want the image to be on the far left side over here, so I'm going to take my image in the structure pane and kind of move it over there. And then I want the post title to be on top of all the other data, and then I want the price to be over here on the right side. So what I'm going to do is take this heading element, go ahead and save just in case this messes up. Sometimes it does. And then on this heading, click the little hamburger and say wrap with div. I'm also going to take this text, pop it inside of this div over here, and then I'm going to leave the heading that has the price in it kind of by itself. I'm going to add some padding to this div here, let's say like 25 pixels, something to that effect. And then to kind of control the positioning of this heading element better, the easiest way to do that is going to be to wrap this in a div too. And then you could just put the div here, go to Advanced, Layout, and then scroll down and choose the option that says Flex Grow 1. And that div will take up all the available space left in this container here. So then with this div, you could go ahead and set it to align right, middle if this has some height to it, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to leave this to right align. Now let's take this a bit further, and instead of having just the plain word bedrooms, maybe let's add an icon in here. So the bedrooms maybe has like a picture of a house or like a bed or something like that, just depending on what Font Awesome has. So what I'm going to do is take this text right here. Once again, I'm going to click on Save, and then on this text, let's go ahead and choose Wrap with Div. Inside of this div, I'm going to add in an icon. Let's see what Font Awesome has here. So do we have a bed maybe? Yeah, we do. Perfect. So we'll change this to be a bit smaller, maybe like 25 pixels, something like that. And then I want this div to, do we want it to horizontally align? Yeah, that looks pretty good actually. You know what we can do is take the icon, put it in front of the text, and then we can actually just remove the word bedroom. So why don't we just do that? I'll leave a little bit of space there. So that would equate to me that there's 5 beds in this house. Maybe you would add like 15 pixels of margin to the right of that to make the 5 kind of stick out a bit more. And then let's see if there's another one for bathrooms. I'm just going to more or less duplicate this div, make it nice and easy for us. And then let's click on the icon and let's see if there's a bath. Yep, there it is. So there's a tub for us. So we also need to change this text here to go to Insert Data, Advanced Custom Field, and Bathroom. And there we go. So now we have our bedroom and our bathroom. So what you might want to do here is set the width to something like a pixel, maybe like 125 pixels, and then, or even less than that, honestly. Let's say like 75. And then you can say space between, and then set this one here to 75 pixels wide as well. And then you can do the same thing, set space between, and now the numbers are lined up on top of each other. Makes it look a little bit more clean. Of course, we can go ahead and delete this bathrooms thing because that's a bit redundant. And there we go. So this doesn't look like the most amazing thing in the world, but you can kind of see how you could start to make a cool layout. So the other thing, of course, that you would want to do is add in a button that says like view property or more information or something like that. So let's minimize all this stuff over here in the structure pane. And let's say inside of this div here, we want to add in a button. So I'm going to go button, And then we're just going to say like view property. I'm going to change this button color to be something a bit more interesting that I just happen to have in my color palette right here. I'm going to add some spacing to either side, let's say like 35 pixels left and right, and we'll set the top and bottom padding to 10 pixels. Let's set the typography to uppercase, and then we'll change the font weight to like 600, maybe that's a bit too much, 500 pixel or 500 font weight, yep. And then we don't want it to be touching the bathroom div here, so just go to the bathroom div and set this to like, I don't know, 20 pixels of margin. Looks totally fine. And then what you can do is on this button, just click the dynamic data option and choose the post permalink as the URL for the button. So now if I look, the URL in the lower left corner has the Oxygen data permalink, but when we look at it on the front end, it's going to take us to the actual post itself. You can also do that same thing for the heading. So you could set the link here, just close out of this and go to Insert Data Permalink, and there you go. Now that's clickable as well. A couple of things you would want to do here. More than likely, you'd want to change the text color, maybe to even that same button color that we just used. And then on this link wrapper, I'm going to add like 25 pixels of margin. That's a bit too much, maybe like 10 pixels of margin, something like that. And then you can also make this image a link as well. So once again, just do the same thing. Go to link settings, close out of this window, data, permalink, there you go. All right, so now we're going to take this div, which is the main repeater div. I'll just minimize all this so you can see it in the structure pane. And then I'm going to add, let's say, 40 pixels of margin and then 20 pixels of padding. I'm going to go bottom border. And then I'll just do some kind of light gray like that. Let's save this. And then we'll go take a look on the front end. So now we have all of the properties listed on our site. So this View Properties button is going to take us to the West Fork Drive, as is the heading, and so is the image. So it's starting to come along nicely. There's a couple other bits of data that we might want to add. We had fields for square footage, garage, and then other features. So let's see how we might be able to incorporate that into this particular repeater element. I'm going to close out of these windows. And then maybe what we'll do is inside of this div with the price heading, we can go ahead and add in some more content for those other fields that I just mentioned. So let's go ahead and maybe just add in a text element. And what we'll do is pop in the full address here. So insert data, we can go to advanced custom field and then address. So that's just nice and simple. You probably want to add some margin underneath these, something like 15 pixels is what I tend to do. So we'll just do it to both the heading and that text element. Next up, we could add in a text element that says year built. So we'll do year built. Ooh, if I can spell properly. So we'll do year built. And then once again, just insert data, advanced custom field, year built, insert. Add some margin underneath this. And then what else can we do? We had the garage. So let's do this. This is a great opportunity to demonstrate the Oxygen condition taking advantage of that select option yes or no that we created. So let's just say has garage like this. And then, of course, that's not going to apply to every property listing. So what we're going to do is, because we have this text element selected that have garage one, what you can do is go ahead and click on the condition option here, go to set condition, add new, and then under choose condition, go to dynamic data, advanced custom field, garage is equal to, you would want to make this yes. So the condition has to evaluate to true effectively to make that content appear. So what we'll do is also go back to the condition and set this to show hide based on condition. And then let's see if there's one in the list that doesn't have it, and you'll notice that the has garage text won't be present. So let's see. This one here means that we chose has garage no, which obviously according to the picture is not true, but you can see that the has garage text is gone where it is present on other listings, as you can see. Now, because of some of the way that we formatted this text over here, it kind of messes up the main heading there. So what you can do is just take this whole div and set the alignment to left, and then you could take the heading, typography, and set that to left, and that kind of fixes it for you. So something else that might make your property listing look a bit better is if you take the whole section that we have our repeater in here and set the background color to something that's a bit off-white, then what you could do is take the main repeater div and you could set the background color to white, and that makes it lift off the page a bit. And then what you can do to take that a bit further is go to Advanced, Effects, Box Shadow, and just set the shadow color to black. Click on the black icon and change the opacity to like 20%. And then let's go 0, 10, 20, 0. I accidentally clicked inset, so uncheck that. And then you can see it kind of lifts that off the page. That's a bit too dark in my opinion. So I'm going to go back to the box shadow and change this to more like 10%. And then we could even round the corners of the listing. So go back, choose borders, and then let's set the border radius to something like 8 pixels. And then that rounds the corner and there's a nice box shadow. Now, of course, you wouldn't want all this content here to be right up against the edges. So let's set 25 pixels of padding all the way around, just like we did for that div there. Now you can see that this image no longer stretches to the bounds of the container, and kind of from the visibility perspective, it's not quite that clean looking. So there's a couple things you could do. You could definitely decrease the font size here to kind of make it fit a bit better. So that actually looks pretty good, decreasing that to about 28 pixels. And then let's see what else we can do. So first of all, we set this div here to a layout of flex grow 1. So maybe let's change this to delete that flex grow. And then we're going to change the width to like 33%. We'll set this width of the div here to 34%. And then if we click on the image element, you won't want to set the width of the image itself. You would have to modify the link wrapper, but you'll notice that that's not going to quite work out exactly how you want. So the best way to do this is actually go to Advanced, under Background. For the background image, click on Insert Data and go to Featured Image. Size, once again, you can set that to medium. And then let's delete the image element out of this. And now we can actually set the link wrapper's width and all of the percentages that we'd want. So let's go to 33%. And then the height, let's go to maybe 100%. See if that works. That does not. So maybe like 300 pixels, something like that. That's a bit too big though. Maybe 200 pixels. And then what we can do is go to the background tab, say no repeat, and then cover. And now let's modify this link wrapper a bit more to kind of fit the rest of the content. So it's 250 pixels correct, 300. It's not quite reaching the bottom. And why is that? Do we have extra padding on this div? We sure do. So that's that 20 pixels of padding that I added earlier. So go back to the link wrapper and then maybe like 250 pixels. So there we go. That's what I wanted, which was the image to take up the bounds of this container there. So a couple of things. The image looks a little bit blurry because of the fact that we chose the size to be medium. So let's go back to Insert Data, Featured Image, and we'll go Medium Large. Insert that. So that looks a lot more clear, as you can tell. And then we lost the left, top, and bottom border radiuses. So we'd need to go to this link wrapper, go to Border Radius, Edit Radii, and then top left and bottom left are going to be 8 pixels like that. And now our border radius is restored. Another thing that you could do to kind of make this look a little bit better would be this heading right here kind of sticks out a bit. So you could set the width to be something like 50% to make it a bit more compressed. So that way it doesn't kind of poke out as much. I think that looks a lot better. So let's go ahead and save this and take a look on the front end. So you'll notice here a couple of things. Looks like the image here, because of probably the proportions and the size of the images that I have uploaded, is not quite working perfectly. So you'd need to play with that a bit more. But the principle is there, that we're pretty much at what we're looking for. And actually, you know what? This particular one right here, it's expanded out. It's pushing the whole container down because of the fact that the address is longer. So let's see if there's a way to fix that that wouldn't require us to make significant modifications. So more or less what I want is this link wrapper to take up all the available space. So let's go to this div here and go to Stretch. And then for this link wrapper, let's take off the height that we have set and see if that fixes it. Click on Save, and we'll go back to Properties, refresh, and now that's fixed. So despite the fact that this one here, that address is kind of compressed and scrunched, it's a bit longer, the image now takes up all of the available height, which is exactly what we want. So everything looks nice and consistent. One other thing you might want to consider is on this link wrapper element for the background tab, you can set the position to be center by going to 50, left, change that to a percentage, and then for top, type in 50 and change that to a percentage as well. And that's going to have the image in the center, both vertically and horizontally. Click on Save there, refresh this, and there we go. For this left div here, let's select that, and then we're going to say space between, and that's going to push the content around to take up that extra space, gives it some more breathing room. This also looks a little bit plain, so after this 5, I'm going to add the word bedrooms, And then same thing for the bathrooms. I'm going to do the same thing. And that doesn't look quite right because of the div width we set. Let's just change this to that. And then after 4, we're going to say bathrooms. And then we're going to have to delete the width off of that div as well. Oop, wrong div. So we're going to set this div, delete the width off of that. And there we go. So click on save. And that looks a lot better in my opinion. The spacing isn't quite right, perhaps because there's a space in front of that 5 and not in front of this 4. So just add a simple little space. And there we go. So now we have our archive template set up. So I'm going to save that and take one more look on the front end now. So there we go. I'm calling that done. That looks perfectly fine and reasonable. And as you can see, it didn't take us all that long to do. So now what I'm going to do is set up the filters for our archive template. So with that, we're going to move into the section of the course on our FacetWP plugin. So let's go ahead and return to the WordPress admin panel and close out of these other tabs for the moment. And under settings, go to FacetWP. There's a facet in here by default. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this because we don't need that. Click on add new facet, and then the label is for the backend, and it more or less becomes what the shortcode will be. So this can just be like bedrooms. And then there's a ton of different facet types, and so these will kind of depend on your use case. There's checkboxes, drop down. F select is where you can search within the drop down. You could have a slider, you can have a number range, all that sort of stuff. Number range is probably the best bet because you can do a minimum and maximum number of bedrooms, or you can say, I want exactly that number that I input. I want that number plus, with maximum or minimum. So there's a number of different ways to play with this. Let's go minimum and maximum. And then for the data source, of course, it's not going to be our post type. It's going to be our advanced custom fields bedrooms. Go ahead and save that. And we'll add in all the other facets here for our bathrooms and so on. So I'll do one more of these. Bathrooms, we're going to change this facet type to number range. Data source is, of course, going to be bathrooms. Once again, click on save. Go back, add a couple more facets, and then let's do like sales price as the other one I'll demonstrate here. So let's change this facet type to a slider, and then the post type is going to be the sales price. The prefix let's set to minimum, and then the suffix we'll set to maximum. The steps, let's say, is going to be like 1,000 for $1,000, and then we'll click on save, and then do the reindex option here. Now this step of the course is going to be a little bit of back and forth just to kind of play with these facet types. Each one of them is a little bit different, but they all have kind of advantages and disadvantages. So what we choose here may not be the perfect fit for you, so feel free to play with the facet types and just kind of see what you actually prefer. The good news is that the shortcode here that we're going to use in our template is not going to change when you change the facet type, so feel free to play with that. Save it, and then go refresh on the front end, which we'll probably do here in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is go back to the bedrooms facet here, click on copy shortcode, and then let's go back to our Oxygen templates. And then we're going to edit the property archive that we just created. Click on edit with Oxygen, and then we'll get rolling. So because of all the time that we spent getting this layout to look as nice as it does, what I'm going to do is on this section, I'm going to add the shortcode above the repeater. And we can just kind of demonstrate how that's going to look. So add that shortcode in, and then we'll just paste in the full shortcode here. Now, one downside is this doesn't render in Oxygen, so you kind of have to save it, go look on the front end, and then bounce back and forth, which is a little annoying, but that's just the way it is. Placeholder width, let's set this to like 125 pixels, and then I want some margin below this, so we'll say maybe like 40 pixels of margin, something like that. Let's save this. And then we'll go take a look on the front end real quick and see how that works. So we set a minimum and a maximum for our bedroom quantity here. So let's say a minimum bedroom of 3. We'll click on go. And then you'll notice that now all the results left have a minimum of 3 bedrooms. So what I'm going to do at this point is just change it to 5 to demonstrate it's going to filter out all these other ones. And there we go. Now we're only left with properties that have a minimum of 5 bedrooms. What you could do then is, let's say you want like 1 to 3, then it's pretty self-explanatory. It's not going to show anything above 3 bedrooms. There we go. So to make this much more clear, we just happen to know that this is the bedrooms shortcode. So let's go ahead and wrap this shortcode in a div here. And then inside of this div, I'm going to add in a heading. Let's say this tag is h3. make the font size a lot smaller, and then I'm going to change this to bedrooms. I'm going to, of course, put this heading above my shortcode, and maybe let's add like 10 pixels of margin. We'll go ahead and click on Save, and then let's refresh on the front end. And there, now you can see that the bedrooms fields kind of line up. It did actually maintain the state here. Of course, I filtered it out with 1 bedroom and 3 bedroom because of the fact that the URL up here kind of changes depending on what facets you have, which is nice. So let's go ahead and add in a couple other filters here. So we want this div to stretch all the way across the page. So we actually need to go ahead and wrap this div in another div. And then we need to set this top level div to stack child elements horizontally. And we want the width to be 100%. Now what I'm going to do is duplicate this div a couple of times. I'm going to set this one to bathrooms, and then I'm going to set this one to sales price. And then we'll go back to FacetWP, go to the bathrooms, copy the shortcode, paste it into the bathrooms one here. And then once again, we'll do sales price, copy shortcode, and paste that in there. And then let's add some spacing here. So we're going to go to middle align and then space between. Save that. Go back to the front end and refresh. And that looks a bit cramped, but you can see that it is working. So you would probably want to use some custom CSS to kind of change the field widths and the styling a little bit, but it is going to work. So let's say, how many properties do we have with a different range of bathrooms? So we have 3 and 2, and actually it's still maintained this state. So we need to get back to all of them. So we have 4, 3, 2. Let's say we want a house with a maximum of 2 bathrooms and 2 bedrooms. Now you can see that there's only one of those that fit the criteria. It's this house with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms at the most, so that's pretty cool. Then let's say you clear that out. What's left is it's only filtering out properties with a maximum of 2 bathrooms, which is pretty cool. So we can even take this another step further. So let's say we want a house that is a minimum of $535,000. So now only the properties that are left that fit that criteria are showing. And then let's say we want a minimum of $535,000, and we want it to be a minimum of 4 bedrooms, excuse me. We'll do 4 there, click on go. And then now you can see it fits the criteria of minimum 4 bedrooms and minimum $535,000. We can go ahead and click on reset there. It just clears out our sales price, and we still have the bedrooms here. And there is a FacetWP button for reset to clear out everything if you want to add that in. So we do have quite a few other filters that we can add in as well. It's going to be exactly the same process. The way that I would recommend doing it is duplicating this topmost div here, so that then you have a second row of filters, or we can add it later. I can demonstrate how to set this section to full width, and then you could have the filters on the left side and all of this stuff on the right side. The process is exactly the same. Create the facet itself in the FacetWP plugin, copy the shortcode and paste it in, and voila, it's just going to work for you. Now, with regard to making these facets work, I mentioned that they don't render on the back end, but they also will only work out of the box if you're editing the archive template. So if you've set this up on a page, these facets just will not load on the home page because it won't be able to figure out what post type you're working in. There is a tutorial on wpdevdesign.com on how to do that on a static page. It's a little bit more advanced, and I'm not going to cover that here because the best way to do it is work in your archive template, just like we already are. I'm going to delete this second row of div here, save that, and then we'll just refresh on the front end to double check everything is good. And that looks great. So our facets are working. So it goes without saying that these fields here for the inputs are pretty plain and terrible. So one thing that you can do is I have a Gravity Forms kind of CSS sample code that just so happens to have some CSS for input fields, which is what most of these are. The input type is equal to text. So what we can do is go ahead and copy that. You can find the link in the video description. And what we'll do is we can add a style sheet to this site. So we'll go to add style sheet, and we'll just call this my custom CSS. And then we can just paste this in there. Simply just save, and then we'll go refresh this properties page again. And then it'll look a lot better than it did before. So definitely a heck of a lot better. Still not perfect because the button kind of is on the same line as the max, but you could just use some simple flex CSS to move that down here, and then you can also style this button. I think the input is facet go, FacetWP-submit is the class, so you could just use actually the oxygen styling. Although you wouldn't be able to see it, you can add this as a selector in Oxygen. So what you could do is, since the class is FacetWP-submit, is you can go manage, selectors, add, you can type .FacetWP-submit, just like that. And again, you can't see it, but what you could do is add some padding. Let's say, 25 left and right, 10 top and bottom. We'll set our background color to be the green that we were using before. So like that. And then let's save. Take a look on the front end and see if that changed anything. And it did. So of course that doesn't look very good. You'd want to set a border, and let's change the typography to white. So we'll go ahead and do that. So typography is white, and then we'll set a border of just white all the way around. And let's save that. And then refresh again. So there we go. That looks like a much better button than before. And of course, you can feel free to play around with that. So one thing is that if you lose track of how to get to that, all you need to do is go to Manage, Selectors, and then inside of that, there's this uncategorized folder, expand that, and then you get to FacetWP-submit, which is the one we were just working with. So really easy to make it look pretty good with just a little bit of simple CSS. So there is a simple demonstration on how to make this stuff look a bit more interesting. You could definitely add some margin beneath these fields, and again, make this button look a little more fancy with maybe some rounded borders and, some box shadow, stuff like that. But you can do all of that yourself, kind of to your own liking. What I want to do now is actually design the template for when you click through to a particular property. Right now, of course, it doesn't look like anything, so we are going to design that, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so of course we have our properties archive template, which is what we were just working with. So go ahead and click on Add New Template. We're going to call this one Properties Singular. And then what that's going to be is our single post for the properties type. So just go to Singular, click on Properties, and then Publish, and you'll do Edit with Oxygen. Okay, so to start off with, let's add in a section here. And then I'm going to add in a heading. Let's decrease this font size a bit to maybe like 32 pixels, something like that. We will double click this headline and go to Insert Data, Post Title. Click on Insert. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in another heading element. This one is going to be much smaller, like 22 pixels. I'm going to change the font weight to like 400, and then we'll make this an H2. And then this we're going to set to our full address. So let's go to where is it? Address, there it is, insert. And then let's basically duplicate this heading, and we're going to instead insert the price here. So go to Advanced Custom Field, and we will choose Sale Price, insert. And there is our sales price. What I want to have is the title and the address on the left side, and then the sales price on the right side. So let's go ahead and change this to Stack Child Elements horizontally. We'll change to middle align and then space between. It's not quite what I want though, so I'm going to open the structure pane. And on this heading element here, I'm going to wrap this in a div. And then I'm going to pop this other heading inside of that, so they're stacked on top of each other. I also am going to wrap this heading in a div too, and I'll show you why in just a moment, because I want to add in some simple text here that says for sale. We'll put that on top of our heading here. And then in front of the sales price, we'll put a $sign, and then we'll change the text color to our green. And I need to go ahead and set this as a global color just to set a good example. So we'll call this Cadet Green. Let's change the font weight here to something like 700, and then that looks totally fine. So now I'm going to add in another section. And inside of this, I'm going to add in the gallery element, but we're not going to upload the individual photos to this gallery because, of course, we're editing our template and not an individual post. So in the gallery source, click on ACF, and then I don't remember what I called my ACF gallery. So let's go back to our field group here. Go to Property Fields, and then in the gallery, we just called this, where is it? Oh, it's just simply gallery. I probably could have guessed that, but no big deal. So there is the gallery photos that we chose for this particular property, the 1973 West Fork Drive. Thumbnail resolution is normally a good idea just to change to medium large, especially if you're uploading high quality or large photos. And all this layout stuff still works too. So if you want to change it to a masonry layout, or if you wanted it to be flex with 2 images per row, something like that, you can configure this to your heart's content. I usually like to do masonry and then set it to like 3 per row, something like that. And then if your photos have captions and hover, you can configure all that in here. And I leave the lightbox set to yes, of course. Okay, so moving down a little bit further, I'm going to add in another section. And then inside of this section, let's add a div. And this is going to contain all of the little icons that show bedroom count, bathrooms, whether it has a garage or not, square footage, and all those other fields that we set up. So we're going to do this pretty similarly to how we did the repeater, but just of course, this is the property details template. So we're going to change just a little bit about the setup here. So this div's width, we want to change to a percentage and change that to 100%. We want everything inside of it to stack horizontally. And then we're going to go ahead and add in another div here. So I'm going to set this div's width to maybe like 10%. And then I'm going to add in a simple text element here. And this is just going to be bedrooms. While I still have this div selected, I'm going to add in an icon. And again, we'll just look for that bed one that we used earlier, decrease the font size quite a bit, and then we'll add in another text element. This time though, we're going to do insert data, advanced custom field, and choose bedrooms. So because I want the number to be right next to the bed icon, I'm going to add another div here. So this icon, choose wrap with div, and then stick the text right next to it. And then we're going to change this to stack horizontally, and then let's set it to 100% width. This icon, I'm going to set this to a right margin of 15 pixels. And so there is the beginning of our little bedroom icon. I want to change this icon to be the green that we used, our global green like that, make it look just slightly more interesting. And then I'm just going to duplicate this out a couple of times. And then we're going to choose bathrooms, change this icon to the bath like it was before. And then we're going to select this, go insert data, advanced custom field, and choose bathroom. Pretty simple there. Now next up in our list, let's see what the next advanced custom field was. So square footage, that's a good one. So now we need to find an icon that correlates to square footage. Okay, so I really couldn't find one that correlated to the square footage, so I just chose one at random that lists there, but I'm going to change this to square footage. Actually, I'm going to do SQFT to save some space. And then what did we have up next after the square footage? So we took care of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage. We already did the gallery. We already did address. Sales price, we already put at the top, and then garage. Let's do year built first. So we'll insert that. And that's actually not where I meant to put it. So I'm going to change this from 2018. I'm going to type out year built, and then insert data, advanced custom field, and choose year built. And then the icon, hopefully we can just find like a calendar. There we go. That looks totally fine. Okay, so you could also kind of configure this main div here to change the spacing a bit. So if you wanted it space around, space between, left align, center, whatever you want. You have a lot of flexibility because of the way that we configured these with divs. So just to kind of recap, I'm going to minimize some of this in my structure pane. So we have the main div that wraps all of these different feature sets right here. So then inside of that, we have a div that contains the text, the icon, and then the advanced custom fields data. We have the text element. We have another div. We have the icon inside of that div along with the text. So it may look kind of complicated, but if you just kind of break it out in the structure pane here, it's not that complex, and it's really helpful once you get an understanding of Flexbox like this to be able to take advantage of custom layouts, such as what you're seeing here. So I'm going to set this to left align. In fact, I'm just going to deselect the options there. And let's double check this as our viewport size decreases. Of course, we already are encountering some problems here because of the width. So it might be best just to go ahead and leave these widths undefined. So just basically remove that. And actually no, because then there's a lot of extra spacing. So maybe you would just want to increase the widths a bit. So maybe like, what do we have, 4 here? So you could do 25%. And then that's going to look a lot better on mobile devices as the viewport gets a lot smaller. Okay, so now let's go down to 1120, 992, 768. That starts to look a bit crammed on 768. So let's take this main top level div, and I'm going to make this stack vertically. You could definitely go ahead and add some margin underneath these. It's probably not a bad idea. I just do 15 pixels. That way we don't take up a ton of screen real estate. So yeah, there's some features. So let's go back up to our desktop size, and maybe you want to add in a heading here that says like quick facts or something. So we'll pop this heading up on top of that main div there. And of course the drag and drop didn't work, so I'll take the heading and pop it there. We'll say quick facts. Put 15 pixels of margin beneath that, and then the font size I want to decrease quite a bit. We'll change it from an H1 tag to like an H3, and there we go. So that doesn't look all that bad. Now beneath this div here, I'm going to add in another, let's say, 40 pixels of margin. And then I'm going to add in a text element. It does not need to go in that div, it needs to go down beneath it. Double click this text element, and then go to Insert Data, and choose Post Content. So this is going to fill in the content that we put in the actual body of the post in the WordPress backend. So just as an example, let me save this and we'll go to 1973 West Fork, and this says enchanting 5 bedroom 4 bath. Let's go back real quick. Properties, West Fork, and then you can see down here in the body of the post we said enchanting 5 bedroom 4 bath, blah, blah, blah. Everything that's in here will now be rendered in this text field, including headings, bullet points, images, anything that you put in here will be displayed in this text element because we use the insert data content function. Pretty cool. Alrighty, so then let's add in another section. This one is going to be our features repeater. So if you remember, we set up on the property these additional items. So we'll call this like additional features. And then let's just basically duplicate this. So font size 28 and tag H3. You would definitely want to use classes for these headings just to save yourself a lot of time and headache in the future, but I am not terribly concerned about that at the moment. So if you have any questions on classes and global colors, go back to the Ultimate Oxygen course and you can find that content there. So let's add in some margin beneath this heading, and then let's just add in a simple repeater. We're going to change the query type here to use ACF repeater, and then we'll call this additional items. Click on apply. And then now inside of this repeater, I'm just going to add in, let's say like an icon. Oh, not an icon box. That's not what I wanted. I just want a regular icon. Let's find a check mark like this. I'm going to change it to our global green, decrease the font size quite a bit. Let's add some padding around this. And then what we'll do now is just add in a simple text element, highlight that text, choose Insert Data, go to Repeater field, and then choose Field, Features, Insert. Now all of the features that we put in the post on the back end are all rendered here for us. So I'm going to select this main repeater div and choose Stack Horizontally, and then Middle Align, and there we go. So now there is those features that we set up on the repeater. So just for continuity's sake, you can see we put 3-car garage, pool, and hilltop for this particular one, and sure enough, all of that's there. It does duplicate the first line a lot of times in the back end, but if we save and go take a look on the front end, we will be perfectly fine, as you can see. So you can see the beginnings of a relatively simple page that gives you all the information you would need about this property. The other thing that I mentioned is wanting to set up a Gravity Forms form on this particular template that then will display a Gravity form so that you could reach out and get information on this particular property. And then whoever the recipient is of the form submission will know that it came from a particular property page. So what we can do is go ahead and just close out of these two things, and then let's go create a form here. Click on Add New, and we'll just call this Property Contact. I'm going to keep this really simple and just go name, phone, email, and then paragraph text for a message. So I'll just change that real quick. Message, set that to required. Email, required. We'll set the appearance to field size large. Going quickly through this because this stuff is not super important. I just want to get a somewhat real looking form set up. And then choose Update. Now what you're going to want to do is go to Settings, and then under Notifications, click on the admin notification email that goes out. The subject you can title whatever you want, so like New Property Contact Form. And then what you can do in the subject line here is go to the drop down, scroll down until you get to the embedded post page title. And that's going to automatically pull in the post title for us. So in this particular case, if it came from our property here, this 1973 West Fork, the subject line would be New Property Contact Form 1970, whatever it was, West Fork. So that's going to be really cool. I also like to do it in the actual message text here. So you can say submitted on page, and then the same thing. Just copy that little shortcode, update it, and there you go. And then you'll notice for this particular form, the ID is 1. So now we just need to add the shortcode into our page. So let's add a shortcode element. And then the gravity form shortcode is really simple. It's just gravity forms ID equals whatever that number was. In this case, of course, it's just 1. Title equals false. Description equals false. And Ajax equals true. I'm going to set this shortcode to 100% width. And then we'll save this. And let's take a look at it on the front end. So there we go. And because of that simple CSS that we added earlier, you can see these form fields look a lot better than they would instead of just the default styles that your browser would bring in for you. In that GitHub link in the description that I mentioned before, it also has the styling for like the submit button, and it makes the message box expand when you click in and out of it. So there's some other things you can do like that, but that looks totally fine as is. So there is an extremely simple property listing page for us. So this just gets all the relevant information across to your visitor really quickly. Again, whenever they fill out this contact form, the recipient in the email they receive is going to know that it came from this particular property page because of the fact that it's pulling in the post title for us. To recap as well, if we go back, then you can look at the properties archive page, and there's all the FacetWP filters we set up there. Just to show you one more time, if we set the bedrooms to a minimum of 4 and maybe the bathrooms to a minimum of 2, whenever we click go, it's going to filter out everything there for us. So just for the sake of example, we have 2 here with 4 bathrooms and then another with 3. So let's set the minimum bathrooms to 4, and we're only left with 2 properties. And as you can see, it's relatively simple to set up. It'll take a little bit of time to get used to it and move as quickly as I might, but it really is a great tool to have. And these filters work for pretty much anything. WooCommerce, they work for your regular posts. They work for custom post types, as you can see here. There's just a huge plethora of situations in which it's super useful to have, and it's a really great tool to add to your repertoire, like I said. So hopefully this tutorial has been helpful for you. I know I went quickly, but if you have specific Oxygen questions, go look at the Oxygen course and you will definitely get a lot of value out of that. And then come back and check this out and it will make a lot more sense. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a future tutorial.